Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. Let me ask these questions. What do you think are the characteristics of a great leader today? What's the most important skill you think you need to have? And what's the most important skill that you need to have just in life alone? I got to talk to the co-founder of Cicero and the creator of the No BS Startup Guide, Farzad Khosravi, and we had a tremendous conversation around these things and so many more things. You don't want to miss a second of this. Let's get at it. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to the Leading from the Middle podcast. I want to introduce just a terrific guest today who really looks at leadership from a different perspective and anxious to get his thoughts on society and so many other different things. So I want to introduce the co-founder of Cicero and the creator of the No BS Startup Guide. Farzad Khosravi is in the building today with me. Farzad, it is great to meet you and see you. How you doing, sir?
Great, Kenny. Thanks for having me. It's been a good day. Had some good client calls.
Oh, that is fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. I guess I really want to start with your backstory. I'm really interested to hear your journey that's led you to do this just very, very interesting and looking at a lot of things from a very different perspective. What's your backstory and what inspired you to do what you're doing?
Yeah. So I was born in Iran. And as a kid in Iran, they have a really good propaganda machine to make you want to hate the West. They try really hard. I mean, some crazy stories, Kenny, you wouldn't believe it. But, I'm a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, and they line you up in the school backyard and they have you chanting things like death to America and burning American flags. It's hard to believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's hard to believe they do stuff like that, but they do. And it still happens to this day, not so much. But anyway, imagine growing up with that, but at the same time, like half our families in the West, in the US, Canada, Norway, Germany. So you're stuck between these two worlds. And then, of course, when I'm 8 years old, we come to the US. But I remember as a kid, always we would get like illegal TV, illegal satellite. So we'd get some American Western stuff. I remember seeing American astronauts in space and being like, hey, like these Americans, they might be like this great devil, but these astronauts, they're pretty cool. I want to be a NASA astronaut. They do one thing right. I think I was a little kid. I was only 7 or 8. So 8, we come to the US, and very early on, I mean, your whole world gets turned upside down, right? So as these formative times for my brain, I'm learning that, hey, everything I am, everything I think is the self, right, has to be rewritten, has to be redone. And I think that just grew with me over time, where I learned that the self that we have is merely a outcome of our environments and where we are. And I was so lucky to be brought to the US, but also so lucky that the internet provided me with the resources to help me take myself to the next level, while other people in my environment, I grew up to a single mom who made, $15,000 a year, worked at Walmart, raised me and my brother. Kids like me don't end up doing very well. And a lot of my friends didn't. But I was so fortunate that, again, the right mechanisms were in place to help me learn and become more. And that's really what has guided me throughout life.
Wow. I love it. Wow. Sounds like a lot of inspiration that you've drawn from. I guess I want to go here because there's something that really struck me, or a lot of things that struck me that are great. But
Yeah.
you right there that you want to help people question the narratives that they tell themselves. And tell me a lot more about that. What do you mean, and how can we get to a place like that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll take an example of just one of the clients I was talking to today. Typically, a lot of us immigrants, especially from Asian countries, especially she's a woman, other women I've worked with from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, we're taught that, hey, being humble, being like having this fear of authority. These are all good things to have, right? And they worked for us in our societies and they worked for us in our family structures. But then you come to the US and, this lady, she's a professional working at a Fortune 500 company in a leadership position. Having that kind of mechanism with reacting to the world, it can be helpful, but it's not what we value in the West, right? In the West, there's tons of research on this, that confidence equals competence, right?
Mm, hmm.
Showcase that you know what you're doing and you're this alpha figure. Everyone's like, oh my God, this person knows what they're doing and you need to follow them.
Hmm.
So it's these narratives that again I work with my coaching clients to help them overcome that. Oh, as a kid I learned I need to put myself down, be afraid of my parents, be afraid of authority figures. But now in order to succeed in this country and in my career, I need to say no, 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 no. I'm the adult here. Let me hold your hand, team or manager, and let me tell you, let me show you the way. And it makes wonders. I mean, that's just one way of questioning our narratives, right? But
Hmm.
there's many more. Again, with Cicero, we're tackling the societal, sociological aspects on a more systemic level.
Wow, that is really amazing because um I can as you were talking, I was thinking of narratives that I grew up with that some I haven't gotten past yet. A lot I did, and you find out after a while that narrative really isn't true, and you're really educating people on doing that on a daily basis. You mentioned Cicero, so I want to give you plenty of time and space here. Talk to us a little bit more about what Cicero actually does.
Yeah, yeah. The goal of Cicero is to fix our broken information ecosystem. That's a fancy way of saying there's a ton of different problems we have. How do we resolve them? And the best example I always came up with is like right now, we're all wondering, are we going to have a recession? What's going on with inflation? And you go on CNN, it says one thing. You go on Fox News, it says another thing. You listen to my friend was like, sent me some bro looking dude on YouTube that like has all these flashy things. He's like, bro, we're going to have a recession. You got to do this, do that. And you're just left wondering what the hell is going to happen, right? What's the reality? Who should I trust? I saw this with my mom. She during COVID, she would send me these like weird videos from Facebook that her friends would share. Some Iranian dude being like, "Yeah, Bill Gates is putting like chemicals in your water and turning the kids gay." Or it's like, what is going on? What does this have to do with vaccines?
Yeah, yeah.
And the problem is that the most easy to find information, the most information that's close to us, and again, research shows this is what we start believing, right? I mean, there's that famous quote from I think Goebbels that's like repeat a lie long enough and often enough, everyone starts believing it.
Hmm.
Our current mechanisms just put crap in front of us.
Hmm.
And Cicero says, hey, instead, how about we find the greatest voices, the greatest thinkers in the world, and we put those in front of you and make those really easy to find.
Hmm.
Just like what you're doing here, Kenny, like everyone's doing podcasts, everyone has their own YouTube channels, their own blogs, but it's hard finding that noise, that signal in the noise. There's a lot of noise,
Hmm.
and Mark Zuckerberg and the like benefit a lot from filling our heads with noise rather than signal.
Mm.
So
Mm.
Cicero finds the greatest voices and puts them right in front of you. Their podcasts, their videos, their articles.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And if you go on this, and we're gonna make sure we post that all over the place,
Mhm.
um, go on your site. It is this feed that just makes so much sense. I mean,
Mhm.
because like you said, sometimes you can go on Facebook or whatever, and it's just a lot of clutter and who do you believe? But you've got these credible voices and a lot of names that most people would know. I know I knew a lot of them, and it's just fed right in, and it's really great, and I love that you're doing that. Um, you also have a take on society and free will. And I loved it. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think again, seeing my own history of growing up and being like, hey, this is one worldview, and then adopting a different worldview, and seeing how much our environment and our parents played a structure in that, it got me really interested of how do we become who we are and how can we be the authors of our own stories, right? How can we be agents in our own lives? So it's been something I've been trying to understand and learn a lot about. And of course, a part of that comes from the educational side of things, right? Again, Cicero is trying to address that. I'll give you a great example, Kenny. When I first came to the US, I remember being bullied. And it's like, okay, I was bullied in Iran too. It wasn't a big deal. But I remember the adults around me, so the teachers would make a big deal out of this bullying thing. So it started like becoming something more to me. Like I started to put more emphasis on, oh, like, oh, bullying is bad. I'm supposed to be like hurt by it. And I remember as like a 10 or 12-year old, like having a different relationship to bullying because so many adults kept telling me, oh, it's because these kids are racist. And now I started seeing everything in that view.
Mhm.
And that was very formative for me because I just started assigning race to things that weren't even race related. Because again, so many adults were telling me, "Oh, these kids are making fun of you because you're a Middle Easterner and they're being racist, so on and so forth." But I was very lucky and fortunate to start learning about cognitive behavioral therapy and addressing some of these narratives that have been told to me. I'm being like, okay, maybe it's because of race. How can I assess that? Is that a helpful narrative for me to have? Is it gonna change my relationship to with people for the better, or is it even based on realistic factual assessments of the world?
Mhm.
Anyway, the point of all that is to say it got me on a path to studying again race more and also studying ways of becoming more powerful, building a shell around myself,
Mhm.
using stoicism, using mindfulness training. And once again, I started realizing the power of free, or what we say is free will, because I was lucky to come across these things and get these powerful ways of thinking that help me react to the world better. But how often does that happen to people, right? How often does YouTube or Facebook say, hey, here's cognitive behavioral therapy, here's stoicism, here's Dr. Cornel West's book on racism in America, read these and educate yourself and become better?
Mhm.
Not that often. And
Not
instead
that
it's just
often.
junk
Yeah.
food that's fed
Mhm.
to people, right?
Mhm.
And we all like to think we're the authors of our own thoughts, but at the end of the day, we're just reacting to stimuli our environments provide us.
Mhm.
So all of that to say, it's so important for me that we create environments and we create worlds that offer people the right stimuli, right?
Wow.
That offer people families that are supportive, that offer people less trauma, that offer people good mechanisms to adapt to trauma that they're facing.
Mhm. I love that. I loved everything you said, but one is gonna it should be a billboard. We're being fed junk food. I love that. And
We are, yeah.
you're 100% right. I want to now shift the conversation because I love the backstory and I love what your website does. I love what you're doing and what you just now said just really resonated. Now, how did that inspire you in the business world? And then I want to get some advice from you for my leaders that watch this.
Yeah. It inspired me in the business world not until very recently, because for a long time, again, I was blaming myself. I think a lot of people I work with, especially immigrants, especially minorities, they blame themselves. They're like, oh, I'm just bad employee, or like, why am I having a hard time? Or, why is we feel like victims, right? And it's very easy to feel that way because we haven't been given the right mechanisms to deal with the stimuli coming to us.
Hmm.
So very recently, just 3 or so years ago, I started realizing, oh, if I worked on through therapy and again my own training of letting go of these ideas of, oh, I got to put myself down and I got to, have this fear of authority and I can't be too confident. And instead, I started adopting what our society values, which is, hey, be very confident. Hey, even though this person is your manager, treat them, you can still treat them in a way that you can lead them, right?
Hmm.
This manager might tell you, hey, do X, Y, and Z, but
Hmm.
they might not even know what they're thinking or what they want. Sit them down and say, hey, why do you want me to do X, Y, and Z? What does this look like? How should it feel like? Okay, let's have a pedigree where we meet daily and have a scrum meeting, manager, where I tell you I did this and I did that. What do you think? How do you feel? Right? These were things that I didn't do, and a lot of my clients didn't do.
Mm.
And once we start doing this, it makes a huge difference. Because again, we have this belief that my manager is this rational actor and he knows what he's doing or she knows what they're doing. And we don't think of the fact that no, hey, I can do things to set them up for success, which sets me up for success.
Yeah, I
Right?
love it.
And
Love
that's that agency.
That's some great inspiration now, taking everything that you learned and really helping you in the business world. So let's shift over to leaders then. What would you say are some things that make up a great leader today? What do you look for? A couple of, I don't know, qualities is probably not the right word, but what are some things that you look for that make up a great leader today?
Yeah, I think there have been great research done on this. You can look at the work from Adam Grant and more recently this book called Talent by Tyler Cohen, all researchers in this field. And what we're finding, well, there's a philosophical thing that I care about, right? One is epistemic humility, which is a fancy way of saying recognize that your beliefs, your reactions to the world are not the result of you just being this extreme rational actor, but the result of your genetics, your society, your upbringing, how you're feeling that way that
Mm-hmm.
day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think just the fact that thankfully this has been I think still validated, which is like when you're feeling cold, you react differently to certain things people say versus when you're feeling warm, right?
Mm-hmm.
These little things that should give us humility in what we think. And then the other thing is to be charitable, what's called the principle of charity. Again, I might be late to a meeting and I have all these lovely excuses, but when one of my employees is late, I'm just like, oh, this is like the fourth time, and why are they always late? And what's wrong with them? And why are they being lazy? Rather than recognizing, oh, maybe they have a kid, maybe they're depressed,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
we don't take this charitable approach. So it's grounding in those two philosophical foundations. And then the tactical things is a leader who is very open, right? Really good leaders are open to new ideas and challenging themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think Adam Grant's work on this has been lovely. He calls this to be a scientist rather than be a preacher or be a lawyer, right? The preacher is always trying to tell everyone what to do. The lawyer is always just like, oh, I'm so smart, I'm questioning you on everything. While the scientist is like, that's really interesting. Let's run an experiment
Mm-hmm.
and let's see what the results are of that experiment.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are three very, very practical ways that unfortunately I know at times I haven't seen as often as we should. Um, and what you're saying, it makes so much sense because if you don't get those things growing up in your background, where can you then start to kind of be that charitable leader? I love that because that's the first instinct, right? Oh man, this is the fourth, fifth time you've been late, as opposed to, hey, let's have a conversation. What's going on? How do you then start to acquire that as an adult?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, I think it's become sort of a meme that everyone has a therapist, and maybe it's too much of a meme in our culture, but I think again, grounding yourself in that, hey, let me start questioning some of the ideas or some of the reactions I have to the world around me is a key thing. And then also like we live in a time where more and more people are talking about this and the science of it is becoming more and more clear. So I think really great work has been done. But on an individual level, the biggest tip I can give you is read Adam Grant's book, which now I forget the name of, but the one where he talks about the concept of being a scientist and
Yes.
not being a preacher and not being a lawyer. I think that's pivotal for a lot of people. It wasn't that pivotal for me because I was familiar with these concepts. I've been reading him for a long time, but that was huge for me. And then also just learn how to have conversations with people in a kind and charitable way. For me, never split the difference was crucial there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a great book by Chris Voss on how to negotiate, and it changed how I talk to my mom and talk to my friends.
I love that. And I love it at the end there. You said just have conversations and you learn so much just by having a conversation with
Be
people.
curious.
And it is such a balance, right? Because the pressure to get results today, but be able to still take that time and be kind to people and listen and have those conversations. So important. I love that you've put that all together like that. Um, just a
Yeah.
couple more questions. This has been amazing, by the way. I'm learning so much. And I know the audience is going to learn a lot. Um, what would you say is probably the most important skill to have today, both in business and then also in life?
Yeah. I'd say just be curious, not judgmental. That's the opposite of The opposite of curiosity is judgment. And whenever I see myself being judgmental, I'm like, oh, calm down. I mean, a great example of this is look at Silicon Valley Bank, right?
Oh,
Here's a company led by all these fancy guys who went to fancy schools with fancy degrees, failing miserably, right?
yeah.
Or even my oh man, I what is the name of that really famous book where he looked at all these companies and was like, oh, here's like the 11 top companies and best companies, and one of the ones he named was Lehman Brothers. And I always find that funny because that book was very famous. I think it's Good to Great, maybe the name of the book I'm thinking of.
Yes.
But again, you find time and time again these really well-versed leaders with really good backgrounds failing miserably at leading their organizations because they fail to be curious. They tell it's a top-down thing. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you how to think. I'm going to tell you how to feel, rather than allowing a more bottom-up approach from their
Hmm.
team to imbue them with confidence
Hmm.
and therefore competence and therefore the ability to innovate and change and question unhelpful narratives.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you said that because I think there's a point, not with all leaders, CEOs, and upper echelon leaders, but I think with a lot, there's a point where the curiosity stops, that it's just get me the results and I'm going to tell you how to get the results. Whereas
Yeah,
that, you should be having those conversations with middle managers, right? Folks that are looking and facing customers every day, and then be able to, have those conversations without judgment, and then help them, guide them in making decisions on how they can get better. I think you just summed it up perfectly. Um, wow.
yeah.
This has been amazing, and I just I could probably talk to you all day. I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to give you some more time to talk a little bit about how people could get in touch with you.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. I have my own website, farzadkhosravi.com, where I offer my coaching, advising, and mentoring services. If you're in the startup world or thinking about starting your own business, definitely check out nobsstartupguide.com. I made that guide because I was just sick of all the crappy guides out there. So that's
Yeah.
available for people. And soon, hopefully, we'll be re-releasing Cicero. We've worked on it for a long time after having it out. We got a bunch of feedback. We're doing a bunch of different things to it. So if you follow me on social media, you'll definitely be seeing me post about that. And I'm most
Good.
active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Yeah.
Okay. Good. I think what I saw might have been the demonstration of it, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
Awesome. Yeah.
still up. Yeah, the old
It's still up.
version is still
Okay.
up. We're just
I thought
not
so.
doing much with it. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Well, that's awesome, and we'll make sure we post that all over the place when I post this. You're doing amazing work. I love the your thought process. I love how you are curious, and I love how you are just looking at leadership and business and the world in general from just a different lens and a different perspective. That is all so positive. So God bless you and continue to do what you do, and just nothing but success to you. Um,
Thank you. Yeah,
oh,
kindness and love is what we need more of. Day in, day after you see these numbers come out. What we saw, just 18 to 24-year-old girls have 60% of them have contemplated suicide in the past 3 year. I mean, these are horrible numbers, right? And we as leaders need to take more initiative to create a kinder and more loving world. I
wow.
really do.
I'm not going to add anything else. I'm going to leave it right there because
Yeah.
that's the last word, and that is just awesome stuff, folks. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast with Kenny and Farzad, and we will talk to you real soon.
Thanks, Kenny. Appreciate your time.